TNA Wrestling crossed the line again with another action-packed episode of Impact Wrestling as we move closer to Against All Odds. And a lot of matches for Against All Odds were announced during this broadcast of TNA Impact. Now, as always on this TNA shows, they start their matches hot. The first match was Broken Matt Hardy and Ryan Nemeth against the System, which compiled Eddie Edwards and Brian Myers. Really solid opening tag team contest this. Once again, Matt Hardy back to his broken brilliance and is really benefiting, I think, TNA. It's actually really benefiting TNA having Matt Hardy in there. Ryan Nemeth, the younger brother of Nick Nemeth, obviously. Again, trying to get some revenge for the System for putting Nick on the shelf. And in fact, they do end up picking up the victory over the tag team champions with a crossbody press from Ryan Nemeth. So maybe a bit of a surprise that win, considering, you know, Ryan Nemeth and Matt Hardy, not necessarily a tag team themselves, although Matt's been a tag team wrestler predominantly all of his wrestling career. But still a very entertaining contest, which Ryan Nemeth and Matt Hardy pick up the victory. But it didn't stop there. Moose stormed to the ring to help the System beat down Hardy and Nemeth. Moose at this point goes to the outside of the ring to grab a steel chair, and he hands it to Eddie Edwards, who opens it up and puts it on the head of Ryan Nemeth on the corner turnbuckle. But before they can do anything to Ryan Nemeth, Nick Nemeth returns and attacks the System, and they sent them running. And obviously Nick was saving his brother Ryan from the similar fate as what happened to Nick Nemeth a few weeks ago on Impact. So returning Nick Nemeth to Impact to help his brother and to save him and Matt from a beatdown from the System that could have got really, really serious really, very quickly. But interestingly enough, bit more on that a bit later on in Impact, as two big matches are announced for Against All Odds, which I can't wait to bring you. Now, remember the last few weeks we've been talking about Bullet Club ABC and their sort of issues with another dates back to when Chris Bay was going after the X Division title, when Ace Austin was saying, you know, he didn't feel like Chris Bay should have gone for that. They should be concentrating on their tag team, regaining the tag team championships, which they lost to the System. And during this time, there's been a bit of miscommunication with them, and there have been a little bit, you know, there's been a bit of agitation between the two. Well, now when they're at the back, they were talking about how when families fight, they get it back together and they get on the same page. And, you know, Ace was saying that maybe they're not on the same page. And actually, what the wrestlers do when they're not on the same page, they go to the ring, fight it out, and get back on the same page. And that is exactly what's going to happen next week on Impact. We're going to be seeing Ace Austin against dashing Chris Bay in the Bullet Club ABC. Are they imploding, or are they going to get back on the same page? That match next week should be an amazing encounter. These two athletes are absolutely tremendous. And I'm looking forward to getting to next week's Impact. Just for that alone will be awesome. And we'll see what happens next week when Bullet Club ABC collide on Impact Wrestling. Next week, TNA Wrestling next week. It will be great. Now, remember that I said at the start that I hadn't finished with the Matt Hardy, Nemeths, and the System. Santino, who actually was congratulating Matt and Ryan Nemeth for their victory today on Impact. And he announced that the main event of Against All Odds in June the 14th in Chicago, in Chi-Town, would be Moose defending the TNA Heavyweight Championship against the Broken One, Matt Hardy. That should be a really interesting match. Contrast of styles, Moose the powerhouse, Hardy the wily old veteran now, I think he could be called. And obviously with broken brilliance as well. Could Moose's title reign be coming to an end Against All Odds on June 14th? Well, you'll be able to see that on the TNA Plus app, as well as a Thriller, I think it's called now, not Fight anymore. But that's not the only match that Santino announced. If you remember, Nick saved Ryan Nemeth from a beating at the System at the start of the show. Well, it's going to be the Nemeth brothers going against the TNA Tag Team Champions of Brian Myers and Eddie Edwards for the gold against all odds on June 14th. Now, that could be the system going from all the gold, bar obviously Alicia's got the knockouts tag, to none of the gold. It will be very interesting to see if that happens against all odds in Chi-Town. Really looking forward to that tag match, the brothers together against obviously Myers and Edwards. It should be a fascinating tag team match for the titles. I'm really looking forward to see if the Nemeth brothers can take the gold from the system. Now, after speaking of tag matches, the Rascals were next against Sinner and Saint. This really didn't go long at all. There was a double team stomp by Zachary and Trey onto Travis Williams, and he did score the pinfall, but that didn't finish there. Macklin comes out and absolutely takes them out. He leaves them both laying in the ring. Macklin and the Rascals have had issues for a while, and it seems as though Macklin has now put those issues pretty much to bed by laying out the Rascals this week. But Macklin hadn't finished either. He was backstage following the attack, and he said that was payback for what they did to him last week. Remember, they attacked Macklin last week. He said he's ended it himself. He said he's basically ended it himself from the Rascals, and he can turn his focus back to Mike Santana. And Santana arrives and challenges Macklin to a match next week on Impact, in which Macklin accepts. So far next week, we've got the Bullet Club ABC going against each other, and Macklin and Santana, who coincidentally, I'm seeing Mike Santana this weekend over at Progress Wrestling Super Strong Style 16 show in the Electric Ballroom in Camden. So I'm looking forward to seeing Mike Santana. I'm looking forward to what is going to be a heavy hitting encounter next week between Macklin and Santana. That should be a really, really hard-hitting brawl and be one that I will very much look forward to watching next week on Impact. And we cut back to the ring, and Kazarian was just like basically raging over Jade Chung, basically verbally berating her. We don't even know why. And security ended up basically removing Kazarian from the building. Not quite sure what's going on with Kaz these days on TNA. But nevertheless, obviously JD Young's married to, I think, Josh Alexander. You don't want to be playing those games, I don't think, Kaz. You don't want to be getting in anywhere near Alexander. So hopefully, well, we'll see if any more repercussions next week on Impact. But I hope that he doesn't feel the wrath, shall we say, of Josh Alexander for that. At this point now, Cody Deaner come to the ring and he wanted to call out Jake something, and Cody was saying that he didn't want to fight Jake something. He wants to team with Jake something and wants Jake something to shake his hand. And the crowd are a bit mixed with that, actually. They were half sort of wanting him to, half not wanting him to, which is quite an interesting reaction, I thought, from the crowd. Before Jake can actually answer, the good hands showed up, basically mocking both men on this point. And Jake got the mic appointed so he can speak for himself. He doesn't need anyone speaking for him, and they get carrying on antagonizing something. Did Skylar, and he answered it with a hard right forearm to the face. And then Santino come out and turned that into a tag match, a really fun tag match with Cody Deaner and Jake Something picking up the victory over the good hands with the void or into the void to score the pinfall. A very fun tag match. Cody and Jake Something, I'm not sure how long it's going to last, if it's going to last, but they seemingly was on a good, they were on a good stead on this one, on the same page throughout the majority of this match. And be interesting to see if they got sights on tag team gold going forward on Impact on TNA. We'll have to see what happens next week, really, in this sense. But a very, very fun match between those four gentlemen. Jordynne Grace was backstage at this point, and she was looking forward to her match later on in the evening. And then basically, she's going to show Marti Belle that why no one can stop the juggernaut herself. And well, she does put the Knockouts title on the line, so we will find out. Another match booked for next week. We went backstage. The system was there. They were complaining about what happened earlier. And it brung out Mr. Joe Hendry. And he agitates them. And you don't want to be doing that. And that sets up a great match for next week. Joe Hendry one-on-one with Eddie Edwards. It should be Eddie Edwards, another wily old veteran of the business. Joe Hendry, that really picking up some momentum ever since the song hit the charts and everyone's rooting for him. But he's picked a fight with the system. Probably not the wisest move for Mr. Joe Hendry. And next week he gets to take on Eddie Edwards in what will definitely be a really fun, enjoyable match, I think, next week. Next week's Impact, TNA Impact, is looking stacked to the rafters. I am so looking forward to next week's one already. They've only just finished this week's Impact Wrestling. It's the next week is looking stacked to the rafters. Looking forward to it big time. Jordynne Grace is now was defending her Knockouts title in a good match against Marti Belle. Marti Belle really showed what she can do. She was actually really good in this match. She actually took a bit of at one point during the match, there was Jordynne Grace has got her ear pierced up here. And I think he got caught in the tights of Marti Belle. And not only did it rip the earring out, it ripped a bit of her ear out as well. Shades of Mick Foley in Germany for WCW, albeit Mick Foley lost half an ear. Jordynne only lost like a little bit here, but still a very nasty injury. Very painful for that. I think you could tell she was wincing a little bit after the match there. Rightfully so. You just had some of your ear taken off. But she did pick her up with a juggernaut driver to pick up the victory, and Jordynne Grace carries on the momentum. And as she was walking up the ramp, there was a bit there with, I think, Ash by Elegance's entourage was there, and I think a mannequin there of Ash. And as she was doing that, Allysin Kay attacks Jordynne Grace, and the Hex have reunited on TNA. They hit her with the X marks the spot. The Hex have returned. Jordynne Grace has got more enemies to worry about now of Allysin Kay. What's going to happen with that next week, or if anything next week, we don't know. But it's an interesting one now. She's got a lot of more enemies coming forward. Ash wants the women's championship as well. Jordynne Grace is staring down quite a few enemies right now on TNA. But you know what? She is the juggernaut for a reason, and I'm sure she'll find a way of destroying those enemies, shall we say. They played a really good video package after this of Gresham and Jonathan Gresham, and he's since the new character, the octopus, the ink, the black stuff, everyone becoming ill after facing him. And that leads on to Santino Marella calling a number and leaving a message saying that, he wants to know about the black substance he's been spewing in recent weeks as everyone's getting sick. But he then says to add to the stacked card next week, Santino then makes Jonathan Gresham against Sami Callihan. I mean, if that isn't enough already to add that match onto the rest of those matches on the card, next week's Impact Wrestling is going to be absolutely brilliant. I cannot wait to watch TNA next week. And he did say during this that the referees will be wearing gloves and masks to protect themselves. And as he finished leaving that message, he hangs up the phone. The phone whose person it was sitting there saying he'd had a missed call and a voicemail. And then a hand grabbed the phone, and obviously that's Jonathan Gresham's hand. But next week, Gresham and Callihan added on to Bullet Club, added on to Joe Hendry. I want next week now. I want to be watching that now. Tasha Steelz took on Jody Threat next. Now, Jody Threat had Danny Luna and Lars Fredrickson at ringside for this. Tasha Steelz hits the throat cutter to pick up the victory over Jody Threat. And, Tasha Steelz has been somebody else that's been climbing that ladder bit by bit, piece by piece, whatever you want to say, in these last few weeks and months. And she's somebody there that potentially could have a big say in the Knockouts division as we move closer to the summer months. But very impressive victory over Jody Threat. Competitive match, always competitive match on TNA with the women. That fantastic division that they've got there. Obviously, Steph DeLand has been there recently. More on her very, very shortly. But they've really upped the women's game in TNA is arguably one of the best rosters out there for the the women for sure, and they're being used, and everything in TNA Garden with the women is rosy for sure. Now I just mentioned Steph Delander. There was a very weird PCO vignette. Now, if you remember last week in that the big tag match that ended the show, PCO come out and handed Steph Delander a rose, which she took. And we go back to this backstage. There was just like this candle lit room, and all you could hear is PCO start screaming for Steph Delander, her name over and over and over again. I don't know what's going on there. Your guess is as good as mine, but what's going to happen next week with PCO and Steph Delander? Who knows? It is intriguing and funny at the same time. Then we cut to AJ Francis and Rich Swann. Now they're backstage and they were scouting the champions last week during that main event. And they will tell us next week to find out who they are going after. Interesting. They was going to tell us this week, but they said we have to wait until next week. They are not telling us anything this week. Again, we talked AJ Francis last week. I bigged AJ Francis up enough last week, and it's going to be great to see him going for a gold in TNA next week. But what gold? Is he going to go for Moose? I don't know if he wants to pick that fight just yet, to be quite honest with you. But still, AJ Francis and Rich Swann going for gold. The tag titles are there. The system, they could go, although the system are going to be busy on the 14th of June, defending against the Nemeth brothers, assuming they make it that far with the championships. But we will find out next week who the system, who AJ Francis and Rich Swann are targeting. Now, the main event was absolutely brilliant. And I wasn't sure. It was Speedball Mike Bailey against Trent Seven. Now, if you remember last week, they beat Bullet Club ABC. The winners of that match would face off against each other to challenge Mustafa Ali, and I believe that may also be against all odds on June the 14th. So these Speedball Mountain won that match. So Mike Bailey, Trent Seven went against each other this week. This match was absolutely brilliant. My only criticism is it did have a lot of interference. Mustafa Ali gets involved in this, and just as when Speedball Bailey has a he does a brilliant moonsault in this, by the way. Just as it looked like Speedball Mike Bailey had the match won, Champagne Singh interferes in the match. Trent Seven hits the burning hammer, scores the pinfall, and it would be Trent Seven against Mustafa Ali against all odds for the X Division Championship. I thought it was going to go the other way. I thought maybe Speedball Bailey would pick up the bitch, and I thought it would be the better match. However, after seeing Trent Seven's out in this, I think this is Trent Seven's best match since he's come to TNA. I think perhaps they got it right with Trent Seven going against Mustafa Ali for the X Division Championship. That does look like the solid choice now after seeing it. I mean, Mike Bailey and Ali would have been fantastic. But Trent Seven he's just a master of so many different wrestling styles. He can really do it all. So to have him going against Mustafa Ali is going to be very, very interesting against all odds, June the 14th in Chicago or Chi-Town, whatever you want to call it. Really, really good, really strong episode of it, TNA this week. Next week is looking unreal for an edition of Impact. It is looking absolutely incredible. Cannot wait to watch it. Don't forget, you can watch TNA on DAZN over here in the UK, on AXS in America, and the TNA Plus app as well. So get watching it, miss it, and you will miss out, as I say. But that was the TNA Impact review this week on the Hitting the Turnbuckle channel. I have been your host, Adam Cousins, and until next time, everybody, let's cross the line with TNA and stay safe.